9:18 exactly, and we're going to be joined by Alvin Botes. He is South Africa's Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. He's here to talk to us about solidarity with the Palestinian people, and he also says it must go beyond slogans, and the UN must abide by its resolutions. But I do need to point out that Alvin Botes is here talking to us in his personal capacity. He is not talking on behalf of the Department of International Relations. And we do truly, we are grateful that he is taking the time out to share some views from a very personal point of view regarding the Palestinian situation, very especially in light of the fact that yesterday, the 29th of November, marked the 44th observance of the United Nations International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Sadly, this day once again highlights the shortcomings of the UN and its member states. And that is exactly 74 years since the General Assembly adopted Resolution 181.2 to partition Palestine into two separate states. This has yet to occur despite all the mumblings and the rumblings from the Israelis, the occupiers, and other UN member states. People are still waiting for this to happen so that the Palestinians can start living in peace and harmony. Alvin Botes, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Yes, good morning, Julie Ann, and also good morning to the listeners of Salam Media.
This is truly a travesty of justice, is it not? 74 years later, and the Palestinian people are languishing in their own lands. They are a dispossessed people in their own land. And the international community is totally quiet about it.
Yes, Julianne, maybe let me just reaffirm that I am formally speaking, of course, on behalf of, the International Relations Department. So I'm not here in my personal capacity. I'm always official. But I think let me maybe just restate what is South Africa's government, posture on the plight of the Palestine people. I think
okay. Sorry, Alvin. Thank you for correcting that. I thought you were talking in your personal capacity, but thank you indeed for correcting that.
All right. No, that's fine, Julian. I think what we are saying as South Africa is that the United Nations is the premium multilateral organization, and its General Assembly, for example, have acknowledged firstly the proclamation of the State of Palestine, and the General Assembly of the United Nations have affirmed the need for sovereignty by the Palestinian people over their territory occupied in 1967 by Israel. So since that time, Julianne, there has been a flagrant disregard for that resolution to allow sovereignty of the Palestinian people, because I think what we are saying as the South African government is that the international people should ensure the obligation and the rights of Palestine to independently, coexist next to an equally independent state of Israel becomes a pivotal matter. The fact that there has been a continued annexation of the land of the Palestinian people by the state of Israel makes the possibilities, therefore, of the two-state solution gradually to become a more complexity and a difficulty. And we are saying, using the United Nations Security Council, it then becomes important for the UN to utilize this Security Council resolution, in particular Resolution 1397, which underpinned the need for two-state solution during the tenureship of the then Secretary General Kofi Annan. And I think what we are saying in South Africa, we cannot continue to pay lip service, Leanne, to the plight of the people of Palestine. And I think we are, driving this matter at the United Nations General Assembly of South Africa to ensure that we are more responsive as a world to the plight of the Palestinian people.
Sadly, it seems to be falling on deaf ears because we continue to witness an occupation that grows more entrenched with each passing year. Recent developments in the occupied Palestinian territories are very disconcerting because it's undermining decades of efforts aimed at achieving sustainable political settlements and self-determination, very especially the forcible evictions and demolition orders of Palestinian property in the neighborhoods of Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. This has obviously inflamed tensions and is spurring violence, has ended up in killings, unnecessary killings of innocent children, women, and youth. So the situation is getting all the more untenable with every passing day.
Yes, Julian. I think we, like I've said, South African governments are gravely concerned. We had to look at, for example, what was the key characteristics and features of the apartheid state in South Africa, and how do that key characteristics and features find semblance within the conduct, for example, of the state of Israel. Because when the General Assembly declared apartheid a crime against humanity in 1966, there was a very pertinent international convention on the elimination of all forms of racism then came into force in 1969. And I think we are making a business case as the South African government that the continued colonialization and the continued undermining of the rights of the most oppressed people have similar attributes to how the apartheid state conducted itself, in relation to the plight of the most vulnerable people. And I think it's for that reason, JN, that, for example, the South African government withdrew its ambassador to Israel in May 2018. And as a result, our South African diplomatic mission in Tel Aviv, is headed currently, for example, by Chargé, with absolutely, very minimal political work being done. But I think apart from that decision, the Minister, of course, of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Pandu, are faced with the matter because I think we are confronted with the reality that the conduct of the state of Israel has become more flagrant and more aggressive as it relates to stepping on the rights of the Palestinian people, and we thought that from the South African government we would need to, of course, explore every other multilateral instrument at our disposal to ensure that the two-state solution becomes a fundamental type of a reality. I'm saying so, Julian, because I think Salam Media have raised the issues earlier on. It's like I've said, it's highly, for example, unfortunate that the international community stand by the fact that there is systematic breaches of international law as it relates to the plight of the Palestine people. And we are making a call that the struggle of the Palestine people should be supported in a similar manner how the struggle against apartheid South Africa has been supported. So while there is hundreds of UN resolutions against the state of Israel, including your UN Security Council resolution 225 over the last decade, none of these resolutions called, for example, for restrictions or limitations as it relates to diplomatic and other economic relations with the state of Israel. So I think we are saying that, as a South African government, we will maximize multilateral instruments, but equally so, the role of your non-state actors, especially your NGOs and your civil society formations, becomes very pivotal to ensure that what we are driving as a South African government, Julianne, find resonance, in the people of South Africa, so that there must be an absolute semblance of unity as it relates to the optics through which the South African people look at the matters as it relates to the plight of the Palestine people.
Absolutely, and I don't want to minimize the atrocities of the apartheid era in South Africa, but looking at the Palestinian situation today, to me it seems 10 times worse than the atrocities that the South African people in the apartheid era had to undergo. Palestinians living in the occupied territories are denied fundamental freedoms through the systemic discrimination and subjugation of an Israeli-designed system under which Palestinian rights fail to exist. So they are prisoners in their own land. They are prisoners they are walled in and they are prisoners in their own land, and this should never have happened. It shouldn't continue, and it is about time the international community woke up and put a stop to this. And apart from Palestinians being prisoners, I think there's an outright genocide going on in that part of the world. Your thoughts and final thoughts on this matter?
Yes. No, thank you very much, Julie. And I think let me first, maybe just take your listeners into confidence in terms of what we think what needs to be done as it relates to how do we curb the extension of the protected crisis facing Palestine people in the occupied Palestine territory. I think the first issue is that what we need to ensure and work towards is to ensure there's maximum unity in the Palestine leadership, of course, between your Palestine Authority and Hamas, in order to ensure that there's an identical type of corresponding obligations between the leadership of the Palestine people as it relates to the governing institutions in Gaza and the West Bank. So I think that is the first issue. So what we are further looking at is that, we were elated that there has been a 2-day summit convened in Cairo in February of this year, Julianne, to try to maximize that type of unity, in particular between Fatah and Hamas, and to agree, on mechanisms that will eventually lead to the conduct of parliamentary and presidential elections. Secondly, of course, there was unfortunate policy pronouncement made by the United States of America under the then President Trump about the Abraham Accord. And we are, of course, engaging at a bilateral level with the United States of America to ensure there's a re-establishment, firstly, of relationships, for example, with the United States of America, because it is our view, Julianne, that very directly the U.S. are the penholder as it relates to the manner in which the state of Israel conduct itself. So we have been unequal vocal when we engage at a bilateral and in multilateral levels. The U.S. diplomatic community about the imperative and the obligation as it relates to bring about, peace in the Middle East. Because for as long as there is not a two-state solution and there is not a cessation of hostilities perpetuated against the people of Palestine,
absolutely,
the reality of peace becomes, not something achievable.
Right. We have to wrap up there. Thank you indeed for your time. What I do want to say is you indicated that the US is the pen holder. They go way beyond that. They're not the pen holders. They are the funders of this apartheid regime in the occupied territories. But thank you for your time. We're going to leave it there, and we can obviously pick up this conversation possibly early next year and see how it pans out. Alvin Botes, South Africa's Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, talking to us about solidarity with the Palestinian people. Thank you once again. It is exactly 9:35 a.m.
These days, I'm more health conscious than ever. So tonight,